Okay, let's talk about average value of a function. First of all, we know that average is just add up all the values, divide by the number of values. So if we think of this in terms of our rectangles, the average value of some function f, and we would just take the value in the first rectangle plus the value of the function in the second rectangle. Remember, c sub 1, c sub 2 is just our randomly chosen point inside the rectangle. Sorry, I'm moving my camera. Inside that rectangle that we created, we've chosen some value of x to use as the height of that rectangle. And we would add these all together. And once we had added them all together, we would just then divide by the number of rectangles. Well, factoring out the number of rectangles, that's 1 over n times the sum of all the f of c sub k's from k equals 1 to n. So now we've added up all of our values right there and divided by the number of rectangles. But what we also know, and this is where we can get a little bit tricky, is that the width of each rectangle is the full length of our interval divided by the number of rectangles. But that means that 1 over n is just equal to the width of a rectangle divided by the width of the interval. So I can now write this as delta x over b minus a times the sum. And moving that delta x off to the end of the equation, I get 1 over b minus a times the sum from k equals 1 to n of f of c sub k delta x sub k. And I can add the sub k because we're talking about the width of each rectangle. And notice that, again, just thinking back to what we've talked about before, is if I take the limit of this as the number of rectangles goes to infinity, that sum becomes the integral from a to b of f of x dx. So if we want to find the average value of some function, all we have to do is find the area under the function, the integral from a to b, and then divide it by the width of the interval. So let's do a quick example. We have a function f of x equals 4 minus x squared on the interval 0, 3. I'm going to draw a quick sketch. 4 minus x squared, of course, is a downward facing parabola. That's at 4. It will cross the axis at 2, and there's the end of the interval. The average value of this function will be 1 over the width of the interval times the integral, 1 over the width of the interval times the integral from 0 to 3 of 4 minus x squared dx. I can plug this into my calculator because using my numeric integration program, I get that shaded area is 3, which means that the average value of this function is 1. So let's take a look at where that is. The average value of this function is 1. So that's this right here. Remember, we're talking about the value of the function, f of x. Where does this occur? Well, this will occur when 4 minus x squared is 1, which means that x is equal to the square root of 3, which means that average value occurs at root 3 and is equal to 1. All right, that's a quickie on average value. What do you need to jot down in your notes? Well, you need to jot that down, or more specifically, you need to jot down the one that I put on the previous page, the generalized value of the function. So, my students, why don't you go ahead and do exercise 11 in section 6.3, and we'll be back with more. Thanks for watching.